At 3:17 in the morning, the hidden camera in my office captured my son-in-law opening my safe. He used a code he'd stolen from my notebook, but the money he took wasn't the shocking part. It was the phone call he made immediately after, detailing a plan that would have implicated my entire family in a federal crime. My name is Richard. I spent 35 years as a security consultant for banks and Fortune 500 companies. My job was to design systems that were impenetrable to outthink criminals. But the one threat I never accounted for, the one vulnerability I never patched, was the person I invited into my home for Sunday dinner. This is the story of how I discovered a conspiracy, not in a corporate boardroom, but in my own house, and why the evidence I gathered would force me to make an impossible choice. After my wife, Elena, passed 5 years ago, the house felt too big. So when my daughter Claire suggested her husband, Mark, could help me with some repairs, I saw it as a blessing. 2 birds, 1 stone. He'd get some extra cash, and I wouldn't have to climb ladders at 67 years old. Mark was in his late 30s, always between big opportunities. He'd been a car salesman, a solar panel installer, and most recently, he was trying to start a pressure washing business. Claire loved him, and he was good to her, so I supported it. I paid him for the work, of course, but I also started giving him a key. It was easier than coordinating schedules. He could let himself in, fix the loose deck board or the dripping faucet, and I'd leave an envelope of cash on the kitchen counter. It was a system built on trust, the kind you're supposed to be able to have with family. The first thing I noticed was missing cigarettes. I'd quit 10 years prior, but I kept an old engraved silver case on my bookshelf, a gift from Elena. Inside were $200 for emergencies, the kind of cash you forget about until you need it. One Tuesday, I opened it. The money was gone. I blamed myself. Maybe I'd spent it and forgotten. Maybe Elena had before she passed. It was a small thing, but it sat in the back of my mind like a pebble in a shoe. Then a $50 bill vanished from the drawer where I keep stamps. A week later, 200 more from the same emergency case. The amounts were careful, never enough to be a glaring, obvious theft, just enough to make me question my own memory. I'm a meticulous man. It comes with the job. I balance my checkbook to the penny. I have logs for household maintenance going back to 1989. This wasn't me forgetting. I called Claire casually. I asked if Mark had mentioned needing money for his business lately. She sighed, a tired sound I knew well. She said things were tight, that a big client had fallen through, but that he was working on it. She said he'd been stressed. I heard the worry in her voice, the protectiveness. I dropped it. But the disappearances continued. Another 100 here, 50 there, always from my office, the one room in the house where I spent most of my time. It was a violation that felt personal, surgical. Someone wasn't ransacking the place. They were carefully skimming, betting that a retired man might not notice a few bills gone from various stashes. They were betting wrong. I thought about confrontation, but what did I have? A feeling, a discrepancy in my own records. If it was Mark and I accused him without proof, I'd blow up my relationship with Claire. If it was Mark, I'd look like a paranoid old man turning on his family. I needed evidence. Cold, irrefutable, visual evidence. So I did what I'd done for corporate clients 100 times. I conducted a vulnerability assessment on my own home. The safe was the obvious target, a Sentry safe bolted to the floor in my office closet. It held paperwork, Elena's jewelry, and about $5,000 in cash, a legacy of my generation's distrust of banks. The code was a 6-digit number, the month and year of Claire's birth. I wrote it on the last page of a project notebook from my final consulting job, a notebook that sat in plain sight on my desk, a hidden place in the open. The first rule of security is that people are the weakest link. I'd written the rule, and now I was testing it. I ordered a small, high-resolution camera online. It looked like a common USB wall charger. I installed it on the outlet opposite the closet, its tiny lens having a perfect wide-angle view of the safe. I told Claire and Mark I'd be visiting an old colleague in Buffalo for a long weekend. I packed a bag, drove around for a few hours, and then checked into a motel 20 minutes from my own house. And I waited. The camera's feed was accessible on my phone. For 2 days, nothing. Just the empty, still room. The third night at 12 minutes past 1 in the morning, the motion alert popped up on my screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. The feed showed the hallway light spilling into the dark office. A figure entered. It was Mark. He went straight to my desk, picked up the project notebook and flipped to the last page. He studied it under the light of his phone. Then he walked to the closet, knelt before the safe, and punched in the 6-digit code. The door swung open. A cold, professional detachment settled over me. There it was, the proof, the violation. I watched him take out a stack of cash. He counted out $1,000. He folded it, put it in his jacket pocket. I expected him to close the safe and leave. That would have been crime enough. But then he didn't leave. He pulled out his phone. He made a call. He spoke in a low, urgent voice the camera's microphone just barely picked up. "Yeah, it's me. I've got the seed money, 1,000. I told you it's clean, it's untraceable." He listened, nodding. "No, he's gone for the weekend. He won't know it's missing for weeks, if ever." Another pause. His next words turned my blood to ice. "I understand the process. The fake IDs come first. Then we use them to open the new accounts. Claire's social is easy. I have all her docs. But we need the old man's info to make it bulletproof. Driver's license, social security card, passport. It's all in here. Once we have that, we can scale. This isn't just a score. This is the foundation." He was talking about identity theft, a structured fraud operation, and he was using my money, stolen from my safe, to fund it. He was planning to use my documents and my daughter to build something criminal. This wasn't a desperate man taking a loan he couldn't ask for. This was a planner, an entrepreneur of fraud. He ended the call, closed the safe, and left the room. The screen went still again. In the motel silence, all I could hear was the hum of the air conditioner and the roaring truth in my ears. My son-in-law wasn't just a thief, he was a conspirator, and my daughter, my Claire, was his next target. I had the evidence, but now I had a choice that was infinitely more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. I drove home from the motel as the sun was coming up. The house was exactly as I'd left it, but it felt like a crime scene. I went straight to the office. The notebook was on the desk. The safe door was closed. Everything was in its place, a perfect tableau of normalcy. I opened the safe. The stack of cash was there, but it was thinner. I counted it. Exactly $1,000 less than it should have been. The video wasn't a bad dream. It was a ledger entry. My first instinct, honed from decades of client work, was to secure the primary evidence. I downloaded the video file from the camera's cloud storage and saved it in 3 separate, encrypted locations. One on a password-locked external drive I kept in my safe deposit box, one on a secure, paid cloud service I used for client work, and one on a tiny, encrypted USB stick that I would keep on my person. I didn't just have a video. I had a chain of custody. Then I did a full inventory of the safe. The cash was one thing, but Mark had mentioned documents. Driver's license, social security card, passport. I kept all those in a fireproof envelope at the back. I opened it. My passport was there, my social security card, but my driver's license was missing. So was my Medicare card. He hadn't just taken money. He'd already started harvesting the ingredients for identity theft. I felt a surge of cold anger, but I forced it down. Anger makes you stupid. Protocol makes you effective. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. Was Mark a lone operator, or was he part of something bigger? The phone call suggested a partner. "We can scale," he'd said. That implied a system, a network. I spent the next 2 days acting normal. I went to the grocery store. I called Claire and told her I'd had a nice, quiet weekend. I did not mention the motel. When she asked how I was, I said I was fine, just a little tired. It wasn't a lie. Meanwhile, I began a discreet investigation. I started with Mark's pressure washing business. Its online presence was sleek, professional photos, 5-star reviews that all sounded oddly similar. I cross-referenced the business license number listed on his website with county records. It was registered, but to a P.O. box, not a home address. The listed phone number was a VO IP line, untraceable to a physical location without a subpoena. This wasn't amateur hour. This was someone who understood operational security. I used a background check service I had a corporate subscription to. Nothing criminal on Mark. No felonies, no misdemeanors, a clean record. That was telling. Real fraud artists often have clean records. They're smart enough not to get caught for the small stuff. But the report did show something interesting, a flurry of new credit inquiries over the past 6 months. 3 for personal loans from online lenders, 2 for business lines of credit, all denied. The pressure he'd mentioned to Claire was real, and it was financial. He was a man underwater looking for a lifeline. He just decided to steal mine and my daughter to build it. The research I did next chilled me to the bone. I looked up the legal definition of conspiracy. In the eyes of the law, a conspiracy is an agreement between two or more persons to commit a crime. The agreement itself is the crime, punishable even if the planned crime never happens. If you know about it and you assist in any way, you're an accomplice. The punishment can be the same as for the person who actually carries it out. And then I found the statistics. Roughly 6 in 10 cases of elder financial abuse are committed by family members. It starts small with a feeling of entitlement. A $50 bill here, $100 there, it escalates. The average victim loses over $100,000, but more than the money, it's the betrayal that destroys people. It shatters trust, fractures families, leaves an emotional wreckage that never fully gets cleaned up. This wasn't just my problem anymore. If Mark was using Claire's information, she was already a victim. If I did nothing and his scheme unfolded, she could be left with ruined credit, debt in her name, and possibly criminal liability if he'd made her a signatory on anything without her knowledge. The thought of my daughter being hauled in for questioning, her life unraveling because of the man she loved, made my hands shake. I had to talk to her, but how? If I showed her the video outright, it would detonate her marriage. She might not believe me, she might choose him, I'd lose her. If I went to the police first, with the video and the missing documents, they would investigate. Mark would be arrested. Claire would find out I went to the police behind her back. I'd lose her anyway. It was a trap with no good exits. I decided on a middle path. I would gather irrefutable proof that even Claire couldn't rationalize away, and I would find out who the partner was, the voice on the other end of that phone call. I upgraded my security system. I installed a second hidden camera, this one in the living room, with a wider field of view and better audio. I placed a GPS tracker, the size of a coin, in the wheel well of Mark's truck the next time he came over to check on the garbage disposal. I needed a pattern of life, his movements, his meetings. For a week, nothing. The tracker showed him going to job sites, to the hardware store, home. Then, on a Thursday night, it showed his truck parked for 2 hours at a strip mall on the outskirts of the city, in a lot shared by a closed-down fitness center and a payday loan shop, not a place you meet a client for pressure washing. The next day, I accessed the living room camera's feed from that evening. I saw Mark let himself in at around 7 p.m. He wasn't alone. A man I didn't recognize was with him. Younger, maybe late 20s, with a sharp, nervous energy. They sat on my couch. Mark pulled a folder from his backpack. My folder, the one from my safe. "This is the gold," Mark said, spreading documents on the coffee table. "My driver's license, my social security card, copies of Claire's birth certificate and a bank statement, which he must have taken from her desk at their home. The old man's credit is pristine, no debt, high savings. He's a perfect silent partner." The younger man, who Mark called Dex, picked up my social security card. "And the daughter, she's clean. She's clean, she trusts me. She has no idea. We use her info to open the first few accounts. They'll be the fall guys if anything goes sideways at the beginning. By the time they figure it out, we'll have moved the money through 3 different shells and be setting up the next phase." My blood went cold. Fall guys. He wasn't just planning to steal from us. He was planning to set us up to take the blame, to make it look like Claire and I were the ones masterminding a fraud ring. Dex nodded, a businessman considering a proposal. "The fake IDs from the guy in Dayton will be ready tomorrow. We use them to open the online business accounts. Then we apply for the merchant lines of credit. The first round of purchases will be electronics, stuff we can move fast. We'll max them out and ditch the accounts before the first payment is even due." Mark smiled. It was a smile I'd never seen before. Confident, calculating, devoid of any warmth. "This is bigger than a score, Dex. This is a blueprint. We perfect it here with these identities and we can replicate it. There are millions of old people with good credit and trusting kids. It's an open vault." They talked for another 20 minutes, mapping out a timeline. They had a connection for creating fraudulent utility bills to prove address. They discussed which banks had the most automated, least vigilant application processes for small business loans. This was a professional operation. Mark wasn't a desperate husband, he was a founding partner. As they got up to leave, Dex said one more thing. "You're sure the old man is clueless? No alarm bells?" Mark laughed, grabbing his jacket. "Richard, he's retired. He putters in his garden. He thinks I'm here to fix his gutters. The only thing he's suspicious of is the neighbor's cat. He's the perfect Mark." They left. The house was silent again. I sat in my study, watching the frozen frame of my empty living room. The perfect Mark. All my life, my value had been in my ability to see threats, to design systems against them. And here, in my own home, I had been reduced to a stereotype. A clueless old man, a vault to be cracked. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated the vault, and now I had everything. I had the video of the theft. I had the audio of the conspiracy. I had the GPS data placing them together. I had a name, Dex. I had their next step, picking up fake IDs in Dayton tomorrow. The law was clear on conspiracy. The agreement was the crime. I had it on tape. I could go to the police right now, and they would have enough to arrest both of them. But doing that would still blow Claire's life apart. It would send the father of her future children to prison. The scandal would swallow her whole. There was one other path, a dangerous, unofficial one. I could confront Mark myself, not as a father-in-law but as a professional. Show him the evidence. Give him a choice. Walk away from this scheme completely, destroy all the stolen data, and get out of my daughter's life forever, or I take the evidence to the authorities and let the conspiracy charges fall where they may. It was a gamble. It could backfire spectacularly. But it was the only play that offered a sliver of a chance to protect Claire from the full blast radius. I looked at the clock. They were picking up the fake IDs tomorrow. I had less than 24 hours to decide. Was I going to be the victim who called the police, or was I going to be the security consultant who neutralized the threat himself? The line between justice and vengeance had never felt so thin or so necessary. I chose the confrontation, not at my house, but on neutral ground. I called Mark and asked him to meet me at a quiet, open-air cafe by the river the next morning. I told him I had a potential investor for his pressure washing business, a former client of mine who was interested in backing local entrepreneurs. He agreed immediately. The greed, the need, was so strong it overrode any suspicion. I arrived an hour early. I placed a small, high-quality voice recorder in the planter next to our table. I needed his confession on tape, separate from the video. A second source. He showed up right on time, dressed in what he probably thought was business casual. He shook my hand, smiling. "Richard, thanks for thinking of me. This could be a real game changer." We ordered coffee. I made small talk for a few minutes, asking about Claire, about the business. He launched into a polished pitch about commercial contracts and residential packages. He was good, convincing. That's what made him dangerous. Then I set down my cup. "Mark, I'm going to stop you there. There's no investor." His smile faltered. "I don't understand." "The meeting is about something else. It's about the $1,000 missing from my safe. It's about my driver's license and Medicare card. It's about a conversation you had in my living room with a man named Dex about fake IDs, merchant lines of credit, and using my daughter as a fall guy." All the color drained from his face. His eyes flickered from mine to the exit and back. The affable son-in-law vanished, replaced by a cornered animal. What are you talking about? This is crazy." I took out my phone. I opened the encrypted folder. I didn't play the video with sound. I just showed him a single, crystal-clear still frame, time-stamped 3:17 a.m., of him kneeling at my open safe, a stack of cash in his hand. I zoomed in on his face. He stared at it. His breathing became shallow. You set up a camera." "I'm a security consultant, Mark. You stole from a security consultant. That was your first mistake. Your second was doing it in the digital age. I have video of the theft. I have audio of the conspiracy. I have GPS data from your truck. I know you were supposed to pick up those fake IDs in Dayton yesterday afternoon. Did you get them?" He was silent for a long moment, his mind racing. I could see the calculations behind his eyes. Denial, attack, plea. He chose plea, Richard, you have to understand, I was backed into a corner. The business was failing. I had debts, not just business, personal, bad debts, to people you don't want to owe money to. Dex, he presented a way out, a fast way. By destroying my credit and framing my daughter. It wouldn't have destroyed it. We were just going to use the identities to secure lines of credit. We'd pay them off quickly. It was just a bridge loan using your profile as collateral. Claire would never have been blamed. I would never let that happen. He was still lying, still spinning. That's not what you said on the recording. You said, and I quote, "She's the fall guy if anything goes sideways." That's premeditated fraud and conspiracy. Do you know the penalty for that? It's not a fine, Mark. It's years in a federal prison. And an accomplice faces the same time as the principal. That means Dex and you would get the same sentence. The word federal got his full attention. You recorded that too. I have everything. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low and steady. Here is your choice. Option 1, I leave this cafe, drive to the police station, and hand over a digital file containing all the evidence. They will arrest you and Dex before dinner. The scandal will be public. Claire will find out her husband is a felon from a detective at her door. Option 2, you walk away. Today, you call Dex and tell him it's over. You destroy every single piece of data you've stolen, the documents, the copies, everything. You transfer the $1,000 back into my account by the end of the day. And then you pack your bags. You tell Claire you're leaving, that the marriage is over, that you can't be the husband she needs. You give her a clean, quiet divorce. You disappear. He looked at me horrified. You want me to leave my wife? I want you to save her from you. If you care about her at all, you'll do this. You'll let her believe the marriage failed, not that her husband tried to make her an unwitting felon. It's the only mercy you can give her now. Do this, and the evidence stays with me. Don't do it, and I use it. He put his head in his hands. He'll never let me walk away, he muttered, almost to himself. Who, Dex? You don't know him, the debts some are to him. This scheme was his idea, but the startup capital, he provided that. I'm in deeper than just the plan. If I back out, he won't just be angry. He'll see it as theft from him. The situation had just metastasized. Mark wasn't just a partner, he was a subordinate. The money he stole from me was likely to repay or fund a debt to a more dangerous criminal. I had just stepped into the middle of a transaction between a thief and a lender who operated outside the law. That's your problem to solve, I said, though a new chill ran through me. Your choice is about the legal system. Deal with Dex on your own time, but you will end this with my family today. He was trembling now. The confident schemer was gone, replaced by a terrified man in over his head. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll do it. I'll call him. I'll send the money. I'll tell Claire it's over. You have until 5 p.m. today to return the money and provide me with proof the documents are destroyed. You have until the end of the week to be gone. I will be verifying every step. I stood up, threw a 20 on the table for the coffee, and left him there. I didn't feel victorious. I felt like a surgeon who had just cut out a tumor, knowing the surgery itself might kill the patient. I drove to my safe deposit box and uploaded the voice recording from the cafe to my secure archive. Now I had his verbal agreement to the terms. It was insurance. At 3:45 that afternoon, a $1,000 transfer hit my bank account from Mark. At 4, he texted me a video. It showed my driver's license and Medicare card being fed into a crosscut shredder. It was something, but it wasn't enough. He could have made copies. The digital scans he'd surely taken were the real threat. At 7 p.m., my doorbell rang. It was Claire. Her eyes were red and swollen. She pushed past me into the house. What did you do? She demanded, her voice cracking. My heart sank. Claire, what are you talking about? Mark came home today. He said he was leaving. He said he couldn't do this anymore, that he was a failure, that he was setting me free. He was crying, Dad. He was packing a bag. He wouldn't look at me. And then he said to ask you about it, that you would explain why it had to be this way. What did you do? He had followed the letter of my demand, but he'd poisoned the well. He'd made me the villain, the reason for his abandonment. He was ensuring that if I ever showed her the truth, she'd think I'd forced him into a confession to break them up. It was a brilliant, cruel countermove. I took a deep breath. Claire, sit down, I need to show you something. There was no clean path left. The middle ground had collapsed. I led her to my study. I didn't play the audio of the conspiracy. I couldn't subject her to that yet. I played the silent video, the one of him opening the safe at 3:17 a.m. She watched it, her hand over her mouth. When it ended, she was silent for a full minute. He stole from you. Yes, and it's much worse than that. The money was for a criminal scheme. He'd also stolen my identity and yours to commit fraud. He was working with a partner. I have it all recorded. I confronted him today to give him a chance to walk away before I involved the police, to protect you. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, that's not Mark. He's weak, he's stressed, but he's not a criminal. You set him up, you never liked him, you trapped him. She was spiraling, grasping for any explanation other than the horrifying truth. Claire, look at me. I have no reason to lie about this. I have bank records, audio recordings, GPS logs. He called his partner Dex. They discussed using you as a fall guy if the fraud was discovered. This is real, and it's dangerous. She stood up, backing away from me as if I were the threat. I need to talk to him. I need to hear it from him. She fumbled for her phone. Claire, don't. If you warn him, if you tell him what you know, it could put you in danger. If he's tied to people like Dex. But she wasn't listening. She was already dialing. It went straight to voicemail. She called again. Voicemail. A look of panic replaced her anger. He's not answering. A cold dread settled in my stomach. This was wrong. He should be answering. He should be spinning his story to her, trying to control the narrative. Silence was worse. My phone buzzed, an alert from the GPS tracker still on his truck. It was moving, fast, not toward their home, but toward the interstate heading east, toward Dayton. And then my landline, my old home phone that barely anyone uses, rang. The caller ID was blocked. I picked it up. A voice I didn't recognize, calm and flat, came through the receiver. Richard, Mark tells me you've taken an interest in our business. He says you have some recordings. That's unfortunate. We need to talk, but not on the phone. You're going to bring me every copy of everything you have. You're going to do it tonight, or your daughter's going to have a very serious accident on her drive home. Do you understand? The line went dead. Claire was staring at me, seeing the blood leave my face. Dad, who was that? The confrontation was over. The quiet resolution had exploded. The professional criminal I'd only heard on tape was now on the phone, and he had just shifted the stakes from prison to survival. He wasn't asking for a deal. He was giving an order, and he'd named his target, not me, Claire. I had tried to navigate the legal maze to protect my family, but I'd just stepped out of the maze and into the jungle, and the predators had found my scent. The evidence I'd gathered to put a man in prison was now a ticket to a meeting I couldn't refuse. The problem was no longer about proof. It was about how far I was willing to go to make sure my daughter lived to see tomorrow. The threat to Claire changed everything. The game was no longer about evidence or legal strategy. It was about immediate physical survival. I looked at my daughter, her face pale with confusion and fear. That was him, wasn't it? She whispered. The partner. Yes, his name is Dex, and he's not a businessman. He's a criminal who thinks he's just been cornered. I took her by the shoulders. You are not driving home. You are calling your work right now and telling them you have a family emergency and won't be in tomorrow. You are staying here tonight, and you are not leaving my sight. For once, she didn't argue. The cold reality in my voice cut through her shock. She made the call, her hand trembling. While she did, I acted. I called an old contact, a man named Carl who had retired from the state police and now ran a private security firm. I gave him the short version, credible, specific threat against my daughter, suspect named Dex, likely armed. I asked for a two-man detail to watch my house overnight, discreetly. He said he'd have someone there within the hour. It would cost a fortune. I didn't care. Then I called the police, but not 911. I called the non-emergency line and asked to be connected to the financial crimes unit. When a detective named Alvarez came on the line, I told him I needed to report an active conspiracy to commit fraud and a related extortion threat, and that I had digital evidence. I gave him my address and said the suspects were mobile and potentially dangerous. He said he'd send a car to take a statement, but it might be a while. I said I understood. The uniformed officers were the visible response. The real work would happen later. The patrol car arrived 40 minutes later. Two officers took our statements separately. I showed them the video of the theft. I played them the audio of the conspiracy from the living room camera. I did not play the cafe recording or mention the returned money. That was part of a separate, possibly compromising negotiation. I told them about the phone threat. Claire, in the other room, confirmed the broad strokes. Her husband had stolen from me, she'd seen the video, he had left, and then we'd received a threatening call. The officers were professional, but I could see the shift in their demeanor when they realized this wasn't a simple family dispute. This was interstate fraud with a side of organized crime. They secured the house, took copies of the key evidence files, and said detectives from the financial crimes and violent crimes units would follow up in the morning. They also increased patrols in my neighborhood for the night. Carl's two men, in an unmarked car down the street, texted me they were in position. Claire and I sat up most of the night in the living room, drinking tea, not talking much. The silence was heavy with everything unsaid. Around 3 a.m., she looked at me, her eyes hollow. Did I miss it? Were there signs? The signs are only obvious in hindsight, I said. The stress, the secretiveness, the constant new plans that never materialized. You saw a struggling husband. A criminal sees a struggling man as the perfect recruit. They offer a solution that feels like a lifeline. The first step is always small, a little theft, a little lie, then you're in too deep to say no. She nodded, a tear tracing down her cheek. I loved him. I know you did, and that's not a flaw, it's what he counted on. The next morning, Detective Alvarez and his partner, a severe-looking woman named Detective Rossi, arrived. They were all business. We went through everything again in detail. They took formal custody of the external hard drive with the master copies. They were particularly interested in Dex. I gave them everything I had. The audio, the description, the mention of Dayton and fake IDs, the GPS data showing Mark's meeting at the strip mall. Alvarez confirmed what I suspected. Based on the conversation, they had enough for conspiracy charges on both Mark and the unknown accomplice. The threat added charges of extortion and coercion. Then Rossi asked the critical question, would you be willing to wear a wire to set up a meeting with this Dex character? He's contacted you directly. He wants the evidence. We could control that exchange. I had anticipated this. It was the logical next step for them and the most dangerous step for me. On one condition, I said, my daughter is placed in protective custody until it's over. A safe house, not just a hotel, somewhere he can't find her. They exchanged a look. Alvarez nodded slowly. We can arrange that, but we'd need to move fast. The longer we wait, the more likely he is to change plans or escalate. Claire protested, but I was firm. By that afternoon, she was in the back of an unmarked sedan, headed to a location I was not told for her own safety. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, watching her driven away, not knowing if the threat was already in motion. The plan was simple. I would call the blocked number back, which the text had already traced to a burner phone pinging off a tower in Dayton, and agree to a meeting. I would say I wanted this over with, that I had the evidence. We would meet in a public place of their choosing, but one my team could surveil. I would be wired. The moment Dex showed and reiterated his demands, they would move in. But criminals, especially smart ones, don't follow scripts. When I called the number, it was answered on the first ring. But the voice wasn't Dex's, it was Mark's. He sounded frantic, breathless. Richard, don't say anything, just listen. He's making me call. He knows you went to the police. He has a scanner. He heard the calls for the patrols last night. The meeting is off. He says if you want to see Claire alive again, you come alone. You bring the evidence to the old warehouse at the end of Miller Road. You have 1 hour, no cops, or he knows. He's watching your house. The line went dead. My blood turned to ice. Claire was supposed to be in a safe house. How could he know? Unless he'd been watching, had followed her somehow, or the terrible thought dawned. Unless Mark had told him exactly which car she got into, having known her routines for years. The safe house wasn't safe if the threat came from inside her own life. I told Alvarez and Rossi, who were monitoring from a van down the street. They immediately radioed to check on Claire's escort. The report came back, all secure, she was at the location, No signs of compromise. It was a bluff, a pressure play. Dex was guessing, trying to panic me into making a mistake. But it meant he was close, and he was desperate. Alvarez made the call. We would use his bluff. I would go to the warehouse, but it would be the most heavily staged arrival in the county's history. SWAT would be pre-positioned, snipers on the rooftops of adjacent buildings. The entire perimeter would be sealed. I would go in with a wire and a bulletproof vest, and I would have a duffel bag containing not the evidence, but a GPS tracker and a tear gas canister rigged to look like a hard drive. The warehouse on Miller Road was a decaying shell, windows busted out, weeds growing through the cracked concrete lot. As I drove in, following their instructions, I felt a surreal calm. This was the end point. The vulnerability I had never patched was now leading me into a dark building to face a man who wanted to erase me. I parked, grabbed the duffel bag, and walked to the main entrance, a giant rolling door partially open. I stepped inside. The interior was vast, shadows stretching from the late afternoon light filtering through dirty skylights. I saw two figures, Mark looking wrecked, his hands visibly shaking, and next to him, a man I recognized from the living room video, Dex. He was smaller in person, wiry, with eyes that never stopped moving. "Toss the bag over here," Dex said. His voice was the same flat tone from the phone. I threw the duffel. It landed at their feet. "Where, Claire? You said if I came alone." "I said a lot of things," Dex said, not touching the bag. "Your son-in-law here tells me you're a tricky old bastard, that you record everything. You wired right now." "No," I said. "We'll see," he nodded to Mark. "Check him." Mark walked toward me, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror and apology. As he patted me down, his hands clumsy, he leaned in and whispered, so faintly I almost missed it, "He has a gun in his waistband. He's going to shoot you after he verifies the drive." It wasn't an apology, it was a warning, a fragment of the man Claire married trying to surface through the fear. Mark stepped back, shook his head at Dex. "He's clean." Dex finally knelt, unzipped the duffel. He saw the device that looked like a hard drive. He reached for it. That was the signal. A voice boomed from a loudspeaker outside. "Police, you are surrounded. Drop your weapons and put your hands on your head." Dex didn't drop. He went for his waistband. In that split second, Mark, reacting to the sheer shock of the amplified voice, stumbled backwards. Dex's hand came up with a pistol. He wasn't aiming at the police. He was aiming at me. A single shot cracked, impossibly loud in the cavernous space, but it didn't come from Dex's gun. It came from above. Dex crumpled, a red bloom spreading on his shoulder. The pistol clattered to the concrete. SWAT teams swarmed in from every entrance, shouting, lights blinding. It was over in seconds. Dex, screaming in pain, was cuffed. Mark, sobbing, was cuffed. I was escorted out, my ears ringing. Alvarez found me outside, surrounded by paramedics checking my vitals. "You okay?" I nodded. "Claire. She's safe. We never lost her. It was a bluff." The shot. Sniper, non-lethal by design, took his shoulder out. He'll live to stand trial. The aftermath was a blur of procedure. Dex, whose real name was Andrew Dexter, had a record for fraud, aggravated assault, and possession with intent. He was on parole. The burner phone, the warehouse, the gun, it violated every condition. He was looking at decades. He quickly tried to deal, offering up information on a larger identity theft ring operating across 3 states in exchange for a lighter sentence. My case was the thread that pulled the sweater. Mark, in his interrogation, broke completely. He confirmed everything. The debt to Dex was from gambling. The scheme was Dex's brainchild, but Mark had been the one to provide the access, the identities. He was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, grand larceny, and as an accomplice to extortion. His cooperation against Dex would factor in his sentencing, but prison time was inevitable. The final surprise came a week later. Detective Alvarez called me in to review some items from Dex's impounded car. Among the tools for re-encoding credit cards and bundles of fake IDs, they found a list of names, addresses, and estimated net worths. It was a target list. My name was on it, but so were the names of 4 other men in my city, all around my age, all living alone, all with adult children who had spouses or partners. Dex hadn't just stumbled upon me. Mark had provided me as a target. I was part of a business plan. This was their pilot program. If it had worked with me, they were going to use the same playbook on the others. My evidence didn't just stop one crime, it prevented a wave of them. The legal proceedings took months. Mark pleaded guilty to reduced charges and was sentenced to 3 to 5 years. He would be eligible for parole in 2. Claire filed for divorce immediately. She didn't attend the sentencing. She said the man she married died long before that night in the warehouse. Dex, facing the weight of federal charges for the multi-state ring, got 25 years without the possibility of parole. Claire moved in with me for a while. The house that had felt too big was filled with a painful, necessary silence. We didn't talk much about it. We rebuilt our days with small things, making dinner, watching old movies. She started seeing a therapist. I did too. Betrayal leaves a stain on your mind, and you need help seeing it clearly. One evening, 6 months later, we were sitting on the back porch. She said, "I keep thinking about what you said, that the first step is always small. How do you ever trust again after that?" I thought about it. You don't trust blindly. You verify, you set boundaries. Trust isn't a blanket you give someone. It's a series of small permissions they earn. Your mistake wasn't trusting him. It was not verifying when things started to feel off. My mistake was thinking my professional walls were enough and leaving my personal gates wide open. She was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you at first." You believed the person you loved. There's no crime in that. The crime was in him exploiting it. The following spring, Claire moved into her own apartment. She was seeing a nice man, a teacher, who knew the whole story and didn't flinch from it. I liked him. He looked you in the eye. I still work as a consultant, part-time, but my specialty has shifted. I now advise families and small businesses on internal security, how to protect against the threat that comes from within, from people who have your keys, your codes, your trust. I tell them the story of the 317 AM camera, not to scare them, but to show them that the weakest link isn't a technology. It's the human heart and the hands you allow near it. The foundation of my life was tested. Not just my house, but my judgment, my love for my daughter, my very understanding of safety. It held, but it holds because I maintain it now. I change the codes. I am careful with keys. And I know that sometimes the most important security system isn't the one you install on the wall. It's the one you build in the people you choose to let inside. People ask me if I regret installing that camera. They wonder if knowing the truth was worth the cost of what it shattered. I don't regret it. Ignorance is not safety. It's just a quieter kind of danger. The camera didn't break my family. It revealed a fracture that was already there, growing in the dark. What broke was the illusion. And while that pain was immense, it was necessary. You cannot fix a crack you refuse to see. The statistics say that family commits most financial crimes against the elderly. They say it starts small with entitlement. But those numbers aren't about strangers. They're about us. About the Thanksgiving tables and Sunday dinners where we assume loyalty is a given, not a choice we make every day. We design alarms for our windows and locks for our doors, but we leave the vault of our personal information, our trust, our love, completely unguarded because the face at the door is familiar. What I learned is that security is not a product you buy. It's a practice. It's the courage to verify, even when it feels rude. It's the strength to say no to a request that feels wrong, even when it comes from someone you love. It's documenting things when you don't yet know why you'll need the record. It's understanding that love should not require the surrender of your boundaries. Anyone who claims otherwise is not building you a home. They're trying to take a piece of yours. Claire is healing. I see her strength returning piece by piece. The teacher she's seeing now doesn't mind that she double-checks her bank statements, that she's cautious. He understands that trust for her is no longer a gift, but a language she's relearning, one careful word at a time. For me, the quiet mornings in my house are no longer just peaceful. They're earned. They are the direct result of having fought for them. So what would I tell you? Be vigilant, yes, protect your documents, use strong passwords, but more than that, pay attention to the small disappearances. The missing $50, the odd change in behavior, the too perfect solution offered by someone in a tight corner. The crime is never in the first ask. It's in the second and the third and the fourth that you're conditioned not to question because family doesn't say no to family. But sometimes saying no is the most loving thing you can do. It sets a boundary that either corrects a relationship or reveals its true nature. Either way, you win. The foundation holds because you maintain it. You check for cracks. You shore up the weak points. You don't let sentiment convince you to ignore the laws of physics, or in this case, the laws of human nature. I spent a career building systems to keep strangers out. My final and most important project was learning how to responsibly let the right people in. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found it valuable, consider subscribing for more real stories about the lines we draw and the foundations we fight to protect.